The conditions which framed and taught us our standards have gone with us. Our needs are now different, and our aims must be. The conditions which framed and taught us our standards have gone with us. The world we knew is gone.
Hello and welcome to the Fomo Travel Show. My name is Flight Captain Achola Rezari signing in. What's up? Yes, this weekend we had a bit of a change of pace. We went for the Macondo Literary Festival. A festival of African writers. This is it. And it was created by Yvonne Award Award, who was a Kane Prize winner for 2003, writing The Dragonfly, Sea and Dust. And she brought down none other than the Nobel Prize winner laureate for literature, Abdulrazak Gurnah from Tanzania. Yes, he came all the way down to Nairobi, gave 2 days of his time giving lectures such as becoming a writer was not my ambition, or or Alive and Aloud, Insurgent Voices in a Time of Chaos. Absolutely interesting discussions follow us. Let's go check it out.
Walking in a deep sleep, dreamy, I felt lucid. What of these paths are the grooves in the sand? I hope it all works out. Fire is the spirit in the
Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Yvonne Award, author and co-founder of the Macondo Literary Festival.
Excellent.
Yes.
So tell me about this festival, and this has been something really great, especially the fact that you guys are focusing on the new language for African literature, not just focusing on poverty, blah blah.
Macondo came out of a conversation and a friendship with Anya Bengelsdorf, who is a Nairobi resident of German origin, but very much identifies as a Nairobi resident. And we bonded over our passion and love for Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. And within the conversation was the idea of Nairobi very much as a Macondo. And I know Macondo in the book disappears, but I imagine that pieces of Macondo fled and took root in Nairobi. So that was the site of inspiration. But Nairobi and Macondo is a site where anything happens, and confluences of peoples, and it's a space where you can have conversations that you're sometimes restricted about having in other spaces. And it's the nature and character of this mercurial and amazing and strange city of ours. And I talked to, and of course we shared a lot of passion for the Lusophone literatures and Francophone literatures that are not usually very easily accessible actually in any of the African capitals. And I was telling her how it was so disappointing that every time the place where I meet the Lusophone writers, I love Miakuto, Hosea Eduardo Agualusa Ondiaki, that the only place I could meet them was in Europe. I found it scandalous, quite frankly. And he said, and I think just from that kind of idea, it says, if we're feeling this way, how many others are feeling this way in the city?
Thank you so much for doing this. Especially, this is the Fomo travel show, the fear of missing out travel show.
Yes.
So we move around Africa, giving people the chance to feel, to realize how beautiful and how many things there is to do in this country, in this continent. And so, do you feel like at the end of the day now, a lot of Africans have not been reading each other because before it was tailored to Western thinking, or what's the reason why before African readers were not reading each other and now it's starting to grow?
African readers have been reading each other, but in quiet places, and it's usually after great effort. It's not because the work is accessible. I think the primary challenge has been around the distribution networks. The value chain has not, the content value chain has not been closed properly. So the distributors, the bookshops have not been stocking these books. Yet the books have been available. If you go to homes, you'll find them anyway.
My grandpa has a lot of books by African writers that you never find anywhere.
Exactly. So it has been there. It's just needed maybe another generation to be able to open up that space and make these works even more accessible and more available. Yes.
Thank you. So is this festival going to be available every year?
It will be available every year, pandemic allowing. The Fomo travel show rocks. It really does.
Thank you.
writing for each other to read about. And here we are. You're talking about discovering about the expulsion of South Asians from Uganda. It's not, I don't mean this in any way critically, but it's not something that has not been written about by various people, but it's that we don't know each other's stories. That's what I'm saying.
Just building on that, is Mia still with us? I'm not sure.
Yes, I am.
Oh,
yes.
okay, great. How do we begin to create spaces that are distinctly African? What are the steps that we need to take to begin shaping those spaces?
Are you asking me? Yes, right. I think we begin to work, we have already begun to do this. Whenever we write a true story, something that doesn't need to be authentic in the eyes of the others, or we don't need to have a proof of any authenticity in terms of Africanity or ethnic identity. Whenever we just try to be a writer, to tell a story, and it's true for the author. We are Africans because we don't need to show, we don't need to demonstrate or to make a statement about it.
Thank you. And just Nandi, for building on what Mia has said, how do you think, especially as a British Somalian, how do you create a distinctive space that reflects who you are and who those around you are?
I don't know, it feels like the conversation is barking up the wrong tree. Okay. People are doing all sorts of things, and I think there's a need for Western attention that distorts everything. Because if I go to Hargeisa and someone's written in Somali a long novel from the perspective of the HIV virus, is so beyond any question of what does a British reader think about that. It's not for them. It's for a local readership, and that's where it belongs. I'm not, as a writer, actively trying to mark out space as a British Somali writer. And if I was thinking of doing that, I wouldn't do that as a writer. I'd probably do that as a publisher or in some other space in the industry. Because as a writer, it's the most underpaid, most time-consuming, laborious activity. And it has to come from something deeper than wanting to prove to white people that Africans can be rich, that they can spend all of their time thinking about their pools or their, whatever it might be. And I think it also undermines what the Western reader's looking for. I don't think Western readers are desperate to read accounts of suffering. In By the Sea, the protagonist is a refugee, an older man who's a refugee, in Abdulrazak's novel, By the Sea. But that wasn't his life. He was a wealthy man for a long time, was a man with status. And that was all unpicked by what happened in Zanzibar. So by telling one episode of his life, you're also telling all the other episodes of his life that go against that. Mahmoud Matan was a man who was cruelly executed for a murder he didn't commit. But that doesn't just make him a victim. He was a much more complicated man than that, and in some ways a privileged man. And all of that deserves attention.
Agreed. And because previously we've had conversations about the hindrance of a lot of Africans from across the continent reading work because of a lack of translation. And perhaps that could be one of the challenges that has led to, a shrinking creative space when it comes to understanding what other countries are writing about and speaking about and their experiences. Is that perhaps a step we can take in the right direction, translating, literature across the continent and beginning having conversations that perhaps reflect who we are, and will that perhaps be a step towards understanding who we are internally first? And that goes to you, Abdulrazak.
Well, sure, that makes complete sense. And I suspect that the reason we don't have that is to do with exactly what you started with, to do with both poverty, or at least lack of resources, and lack of, how to put it, lack of intention, lack of commitment from the authorities, from the state, to make it possible. I'm thinking, for example, of this festival here. And I'm not sure, because I haven't investigated, but I imagine that quite a large proportion, if not all, of the funding that's making this possible is coming from other than the state. And that's what I mean, that there is no support being offered by the authorities themselves to say this is something important for our society, this is something important for our community. Let's put something into this. The reason there are not enough translations of African works between different languages, even those so-called official languages of these states, is because there is no investment from the society itself. And this is both in terms of putting money into publishing, but also into generating some kind of atmosphere to say, this is important, read. But I don't think it's there. So it's not good saying why, not you're saying it, but it's not good saying that we need to translate more books. We need to have, who's going to do it? Because it needs money. And it needs commitment. It needs commitment from those who can make the commitment. And that's, at the moment, since the state owns everything in most African countries, it has to be the state. And they're not doing it.
Oftentimes we hear, and again, this is to you, Nadifa, that African writers also should advocate for the space, for the state, to start, investing in the literature world. But is that also an unfair expectation that we put on African writers? Here you are creating this amazing work, then you have to have the extra responsibility of advocating for this work to be read. What would you say we need to do to aid or sort of leverage on the work that African writers are working on to ensure that it gets read by a wider audience and there's more participation?
I don't know if I agree with the state. In Somaliland, the book festival and things have had some support from the state, but it's been from outside of that. It's been in the civic space. And that's a good thing, because I think the state doesn't want to challenge. I don't think the state is a supporter of a free art space. Every state will have its own propaganda that it wants to use through the arts. So I prefer to work outside of that. I completely understand though about, the British have the British Council and they spend a lot of money on that soft power And even in the UK, with all of its resources, literature is still a marginal space. There's very few people are interested in literary fiction. And you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink when there's so many other things to grab people's attention. So I'm kind of accustomed to it being a minority sport. But within that, there should be passion. There should be this desire for, in Africa, in Somaliland, why are we not reading Kenyan authors to understand that relationship a bit better, or Ethiopian writers? Because I think outside of those interactions, all you have is the political, and the political is often fueled with hate and mistrust and competition. And some of that could be pulled away through the arts, but I don't trust states to do that anymore.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
I disagree with you. This seems to me the state has a responsibility in certain areas. Maybe you're thinking of the state as always being having its own kind of like nasty agenda. I'm thinking about the state as having responsibility, for example, to make sure that that group people are provided with education, provided with hospitals, provided with certain amenities that make for, as it were, civil life. And it seems to me encouraging people to participate in cultural activities is also one of those necessities of life. And to be in the same way as you don't provide hospitals with a political agenda, of course you do if it's a corrupt state, which unfortunately many of our states are. But if you provide hospitals, it's because you're making sure that the health of your citizens is kept at a reasonable level. And I'm thinking of the state intervention in that way. That is, that it provides support for cultural activities because it's a necessity of civil life.
Do you disagree with that?
In some ways,
Okay.
but I don't want to.
No,
Try
please.
to let everyone else
Please,
speak.
please.
Bad with that.
Yes,
Oh, come on, let's
make it
go.
we want to.
When it comes to education, yes, and even public healthcare can be politicised. Who gets help when and how and why? That's always been political. People were refused HIV treatment or public awareness campaigns on important things like that. In Africa, there is a huge issue with very evangelical or hardline religious organisations dominating what can be said publicly, so the governments often don't want to interfere with that. So even in Britain, we recently had Brexit and the government's festival of Brexit. The arts are ripe for exploitation in promoting political agendas, and I prefer the state to just step away.
Okay, you prefer that. I prefer them to participate, and even given that there is clearly some kind of political stance to this and that, I prefer for the state to be participating and an argument to take place to say, okay, we'll take a chunk of that and you take a chunk of that, rather than do nothing. Do nothing about schools, do nothing about hospitals, do nothing about culture. I don't think that's right.
All right, and welcome to the Fomo Travel Show. My name is Flight Captain Achola Rosario signing in. What's up? I'm here with the author Hasfa. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Hafsa Zayan. I wrote We Are All Birds of Uganda. And yeah, I'm here in Nairobi for the Macondo Literary Festival.
Excellent. So yeah, your book is about colorisms and traveling around Africa, you rediscovering your roots, as it speak. Do you feel like travel, like now with the literature, is encouraging Africans to travel within their countries more and get to know each other more?
I would love that to be one of the effects and one of the hopes. I mean, I'm actually part Nigerian, so I don't actually have a background as in like ancestrally in East Africa, but it's definitely something worth exploring to travel within Africa before you go out to see the rest of the world. I mean, Uganda was definitely one of the most beautiful, most exciting, and if you've read my novel, you'll see that it's pretty much a love letter to Uganda. Incredible places and people that I'd ever met and ever been, one of the places I'd ever been. Since I've been here in Nairobi, I've had conversations with local Nairobians. He said, "Oh, I've never been to Zanzibar." And I thought, but it's just around the corner. Oh my gosh, there you go, you're guilty. So yes, read my book and hopefully you'll be encouraged to travel locally too.
Excellent. And then finally, how did you feel this be on stage with the Nobel Laureate?
Starstruck. No, he's a really down-to-earth guy, and all of the authors here who are very, very prolific and sort of much more esteemed than myself. I felt very, very honored and very, very privileged to be sharing the same space as them.
Excellent. So come down to the Macondo Literary Festival. Is happening until tomorrow. And yeah, come and check out all the writers and see what's happening. We just missed the Nobel Laureate, I want to call him Honorable, Abdulrazak Gurnah. But then at the end of the day, yeah.
He'll be back on tomorrow 3 times from 2:00.
Let's just hope he gives us an interview.
Take care. Bye.
Hi.
Hi.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Humphrey Jeremiah Ojuang, Kenyan by birth, teacher by training. I have been a teacher for the last 42 years, 34 of them at the University of Nairobi, Kenya.
How do you feel about this Macondo Literary Festival? Do you feel like it actually has achieved its target of popularizing African literature?
Well, I have a mixed feeling towards Macondo Literary Festival. It has brought in people from Francophone Africa, Lusophone Africa, and of course Anglophone Africa. But the locals, a few local writers who would have liked to participate were not given space. So I would like to appeal directly to my good friend, what's her name? Yvonne, what's her second, Adhiambo Owor. She has done a tremendous job. But let her expand the space with her colleagues so that they can bring in African writers. And when you talk about African writers, we should be thinking of indigenous African languages. We should be thinking of the Luo. And I write in the Luo and I write in English. We should be thinking of Gikuyu, Ngugis, Maitunjogira, and Shaitani Mudarabaini. We should not just be thinking of English and Kiswahili. We should be thinking of Kalenjin and Luyas, the small dialects of Luyas. Otherwise, these languages are going to die. But she has thought about a great idea. I'm so grateful to her. When you meet her, please tell her she's doing a great job with her 3 other colleagues. And I hope to attend the next one. This is a great job you have started.
And a very nice shirt you have there, by the way.
Thank you. And yes, you are telling me your name is Achola.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you my name is Ojuang. And you are asking me the meaning of Achola. And I was telling you that the meaning of your name Achola has to do with the death. And the meaning of my name Ojuang has to do with the death. Now, let's look at the philosophy of it. Life and death mean the same thing. They're just 2 sides to the same thing. So I don't want to go into the deeper meaning of the African narratological epistemology of Achola, or Ochola, Ajuang, or Ojuang, but they have something to do with death.
Is it something about the child of the father who has passed away?
Correct.
Yeah.
Ojuang is left in the mother's womb So your mother gets pregnant, and then before you're born, your father is dead. So you're born without a father. So if you're male, you are a Juang. If you're female, you are a Juang. In my case, I had both parents, which means I inherited this name from some ancestor way, way, way back, maybe 6th ancestor.
And with Achola?
It's the same thing, but Achola is more complicated. When a man dies and leaves a widow, there is a cord which is tied around her waist, and she's supposed to stay celibate until she gets the next husband or sex partner. So if she gets pregnant before she gets someone to break the cord, then the baby who comes out of that experience is called Ochola or Achola. That is one explanation, but there could be several other explanations.
Thank you for that.
And I can see you're tremendously excited.
Thank you so much. And how about you? You're a new writer. How do you feel about this whole experience?
I'm Irene Wanda Chipkemboi. My experience here is awesome. I've never been in something like this, and this festival has made young people like me, who is starting with the journey of writing, to have been impacted. And I really thank Yvonne for all this.
So yeah, we saw the discussions with two of really wonderful writers, female writers that I really came to admire. Her name was Hasfa Zayan. She wrote the Mercy books. She was the winner of Stormzy's Marquee Books Writers Prize. She wrote this one. Yeah, I went book shopping. We Are All Birds of Uganda. Yep, and then I also bought Abdulrazak's book By the Sea. Bought Nearly All the Men in Lagos Are Mad. That is by Damilare Kuku. And then also Razna Wara, The Lords of Impunity, about how the UN is going through all sorts of impunity, from theft of resources to raping of victims, and nothing is done about it. So that should be interesting. But I love the fact that this was brought together to showcase all these African artists, African writers that we don't know about, because simply we don't have the exposure of them. And yeah, most of the times if you want to hear about them or meet them, you have to be in Europe. But no, this time we're in Africa, in Kenya, right here on home soil. So thank you so much, Yvonne, for that. What would I give this Macondo Festival? It's going to happen every year at the National Theatre of Nairobi, by the way. Yeah, so National Theatre of Nairobi, that's where it takes place every year. What would I give the festival? I would definitely give it at least a 6, 7. I think there could be more interaction, less sitting on a stage and talking. Writers workshops. I wanted to ask about how do you write about yourself and not sound vain. I didn't get my question answered, but then at the end of the day, that's what my problem is. I just think it's vanity, but then this is our stories. We have to get them out. So Macondo Literary Festival in Nairobi, 6 out of 10. Go check it out. So for the Fomo Travel Show, my name is Flight Captain Achola Rosario signing out. And don't forget to subscribe. I love you guys. Check me out in the next episode 90. Big one coming up. Let's see what we've got. Bye.
It's gone.